everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and Auto Remarketing. In today's webinar, how automotive marketers can win with streaming TV, we have a great session in store brought to you by Premion. But just a couple of quick notes before we get started. We are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to it so you can review the great information and share it with your colleagues. You will be in listen-only mode for our session, but you can ask questions using the chat function here on the Zoom platform, and we'll get to as many as we can during our time together. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll make sure they're forwarded on to the team at Premion so they can respond back to you directly. So let's get right to our session featuring Jason Jones, Director of Regional Sales at Premion. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Nick, thanks for having us, and thanks for having the team at Premion join the call today. Really appreciate it. We know this is a ever-changing landscape when it comes to the streaming TV business. Working with trusted, quality partners is part of vetting the process and the responsibility of what our attendees have to do today to vet out candidacies and candidates in the CTV and OTT space. Premion was built in its infancy about 6 years ago as a technology solution and not as an extension to our broadcast affiliation with Tegna Media. In the awards segment space, we were just awarded Synopsys Best of the Best Award for Best Ad Tech Solution. You can see some of the other awards for Premion just right below this in regards to winning in the ad tech space. These awards are won up against customers like Roku buy-side platform, Hulu buy-side platform, and our friends at the Trade Desk as well. So great competitive landscape when it comes to the OTT and streaming business and the technology awards. And we're just happy to be one of the great recognized companies in the OTT and CTV space. Through today's presentation, we're going to look at 4 different tent poles as far as it pertains to automotive. And the first is the OTT media landscape. And just a brief overview on that before we accelerate into the CTV and OTT opportunities, how to build a winning OTT media plan, and basic consumption for the rules of the road ahead, and some things to look out for. Today, monitoring the chat box, we have Catherine and Anthony. If there's any questions, they can answer them directly in the chat box, or we can save them for the end for greater dialogue. So with that, when we look at the landscape of streaming TV, it's a landscape of anytime, anywhere. Prime time is anytime in this landscape. Must-see TV used to be the thing that we used to sit down and watch Thursday nights. If you go back far enough, as I do, to watch Friends, Seinfeld, and Frasier all together, you had to sit down and make appointment TV. Now, prime time is anytime. And the landscape is uber competitive. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide today, but these are all the players from a technology standpoint, content standpoint, and distribution standpoint that are in the landscape space. It's important when you look at a partner in the CTV and OTT space, when you vet them out, that they're a platform agnostic partner. We'll get into what that means here shortly, to make sure that we can actually extend our tentacles into all of these areas and not have to buy each and every area separately. That's one of the great aspects of working with Premion. 84% of buyers that are increasing CTV spend say consumer privacy issues are the reason for that spend and that increase. We've seen the news articles lately about what's going on in social media, some of the changes and algorithm changes in PPC and buying your branded PPC buys, etc. And then we're tracking the changes along with Apple, the IDFA changes that came down the pike last year, midway through the year last year, enabling or deprecating, location tracking for mobile. This was a big change for the industry. And when it comes to location tracking and tracking via mobile devices to your showrooms, this is a big chunk of your strategy that's taken out, whether it be on the social side or on the location tracking side for mobile. The good news is connected TV targeting will not be affected by this change. IDFA does change other things downstream, which I'll touch on a few of those things here shortly. However, for OTT and streaming TV, This is one of the main culprits on why you're seeing a very large influx and adoption rate to get away from social campaigns and branded PPC campaigns and getting further down the funnel in connected TV campaigns with great targeting. Ad fraud. Combating ad fraud in the OTT and CTV space. Ad fraud has taken over credit card fraud in 2020 as the #1 source for fraudulent activity in the United States. I'll highlight the one on the bottom left. $90 million is the estimate from the Octobot a fraud scheme that went on for 18 months in the connected TV space and the digital space. Finding a partner that is fraud-free, that has a trusted network, is very important. We'll talk about navigating this landscape and a few other bullet points as we move forward. Very important. This is a new acronym for many of you on this call, TAG. It wouldn't be a digital call, of course, without a new acronym, correct? So TAG is the Trustworthy Accountability Group. I would recommend that you bookmark this on your search engine to go in, and there's a measurement tool that allows you to search partnerships to see if they're TAG certified or TAG listed against fraud. If you're a partner such as Premion that you're TAG certified, that means you've gone 100% compliant in the audit process to verify that your books and your serving technology is 100% fraud-free. This is why at Premion that we guarantee all of our impressions 100%. So make sure that TAG is part of your demand moving forward from your partnerships moving forward. All right, let's talk about accelerating our opportunities and looking a little bit ahead now. We know that the space is growing tremendously. Rounding up, 84% of households are projected to be connected TV, CTV households in 2022. There's no wonder why this space is skyrocketing, not only from a user adoption rate, but from a advertising and revenue adoption rate as well for most companies. Vertical to the auto category, and this is research provided by our friends over at Simmons Research. I'll concentrate on the things that are on the left-hand side of the screen when it comes to what they're streaming. If I'm covering that while you're listening, I'll let you look through some of the demographics of what auto intenders and ad-supported TV look like on the right-hand side of the screen. Nearly 80% of auto intenders watch ad-supported connected TV. Streaming series that are no longer available on network TV, 47%. Streaming series that are currently airing on traditional networks, nearly 50%. That's a balance between network and streaming. Streaming original series exclusive to just streaming content. And of course, most of the streaming space in the OTT space started in the infancy of streaming movie libraries on video on demand and documentaries video on demand. Growing space that we're seeing, sports, especially with our partnership with Fubo and some of the sports streaming services out there on direct partnerships like with NBC Sports and Fox Sports. Streaming sports is 26% this year. I anticipate that's going to be pushing upwards of 50% in the very near future. Talking about growth, this is your huge opportunity when looking at jumping into the OTT space and why you should. BIA Kelsey forecasts total auto spending in local OTT and streaming on connected TV will reach 302 million in 2022 this year. And then just 3 short years away, that will rise 80% to 545 million. That's across tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 auto, making up nearly 90% of the forecasted OTT and CTV spend for auto. The other 10% are things like backend and auto extensions. The bottom part of this supports the previous graph that we were just talking about the forecast from 2020 through 2025. Those growth rates are very similar across all aspects as far as when looking forward in a growth ratio to 2025. Towards the top of the slide, 39% of all US auto intenders cannot be reached on traditional cable or traditional TV. 16% of those auto intenders have never had a cord into their house, so to speak, for cable television. 24% are new cord cutters. And you see, based upon those demographics, very even across the board with adults 35-54 leading the way with 53% share of voice. Not to be outdone, keep an eye on the growing category of adults 55 plus. For anyone under the age of 55, it tends to be more of a convenience factor in streaming and OTT. Over 55, as people reach the retirement ages and beyond, it tends to be more of a factor in cutting the cord to save money. So either way, the growth and the path to a successful strategy in OTT is permeating all age groups and all demographic influences. All right, how to build an award-winning automotive CT and OTT plan in 5 easy steps. I'm going to walk through 5 criteria here, and we're flying through this presentation, so I hope everything is going well. Like I said, the chat box is being monitored by Catherine and Anthony right now. We will have a time for questions at the end, as well as sharing a couple of examples on creative. All right, moving forward. All right, so the number one thing you want to look at in this space, and these are the 5 steps of basically vetting any CTV or OTT partner in the space. You want to understand where their inventory supply path comes from. Just like in the automotive space, it's very important to understand your supply chain and your supply path and where things come from. You want to look at directly sourced premium inventory that's prioritized as being brand safe in its delivery, that has scale, and has pre-approved content sources. It's very important to know what you're buying up front and the group that you're running with up front before you buy the inventory. Unlike open ad exchanges, which are biddable inventory, tend to be lower down the waterfall of the OTT landscape. They're also considered more remnant in sources and have a higher increase of fraud risk. Getting back to the tag certification, this is where tag certification becomes important, where you can work with a partner that guarantees 100% of their inventory. And when we talk about quality inventory, not all inventory is created equal. You know, just on Roku alone, there's almost 9,000 apps you can download on Roku. I can probably think of 3/4, if not more, of those that I would not want my brand associated with if I was concerned about brand safety and quality of content. So when you look at quality of content, it really matters when you look across the landscape of not only the History Channel or our fully integrated, directly sourced inventory from network partners like the Discovery Channel of brands and Fox and our friends at HGTV. These are direct sourced inventories that are in our private marketplace where we get the inventories directly from those supply path partners. We know the inventory that we're getting up front. And when you look at scale and when you look at quality of that inventory, across the bottom of this gets back to what I mentioned at the top of the call. Working with a partner that is platform agnostic. We don't worry about walled gardens or sign-ins or geographic territories or zones per se. Not worried about subscriptions or specific device usage. Back 5 years ago, we used to report only on device usage in the OTT space, not just unique to Premion. Here's how much ran on Roku. Here's how much ran on Apple TV. Here's how much ran on Amazon Fire Stick. Anymore, device usage in the household doesn't matter. I have a household that has 27 connected devices that can stream OTT content. What you worry about as an advertiser is finding the right audience first with great data and following that audience in the household beyond the IP address level that allows you to demographically and psychographically target the individuals you're trying to reach for that quality audience. And since our inventory comes at the top of the waterfall and cascades down into the other platforms, it doesn't matter which device that you're using to sign in or which technology provider that you're using as a plugin in your household, whether it be connected TV, so Roku, or devices like Apple TV or Amazon Fire streaming sticks. Platform agnostic is the new normal when it comes to CTV and OTT space. So make sure you vet out your partners in a platform agnostic ratio. And that what that means in that supply path is working with the most trusted partners in the network industry. We covered some of these on the previous slides, but direct to relationships and direct to publisher relationships, including Spanish language partnerships. This is inclusive not only in video on demand, which is where OTT started in its infancy, but it also is local insertion into live networks and live programming as well. such as our exclusive relationship with Major League Baseball networks. Or if you're streaming on the Fox app or CNN app or MSNBC app or NBC Sports apps, dynamic insertion into those platforms as well. Again, most important, fraud-free, brand safety, and quality of content are what is going to get your message seen in a lean-in, engaged audience moving forward. Most importantly, I've mentioned this a couple times, I'll double click on it again. We do not work with open ad exchanges. Open ad exchanges are more remnant focused, do not access all the inventory, such as discovery networks. They only get a partial list of inventory. And the fraud is just too out of control. In fact, the lowest fraud that I've seen quoted in a Forbes article just a year ago was anywhere between 18 to 20%. I've seen it as high as 45%. So getting a control group that has vetted that up front and having controlled inventory is a most important thing in a partner. Also, no user-generated content, no short-form content. We're talking about all pre-roll and mid-roll inventory only. In that landscape, serving non-skippable ads. The landscape environment is a lot shorter, so we work in the non-skippable ads environment only. And that's part of the criteria and the 8 steps of criteria that we trust our network partners to sign off on prior to even committing to working with them. They have to actually agree to our 8 steps and our 8 criteria before we come to an agreement. Back 5 years ago, most people were just scrapping, just trying to get inventory and taking all they could. Brand safety was never a concern. Now we're hyper-focused on brand safety at Premion. And the coolest thing I think we'll probably show on this call is dynamic ad insertion and direct inventory feeds into your creative. I'll show a couple examples here at the end when we wrap up, but what we'll show you is an example of direct inventory feeds that come off of your website every 24 hours. We know there's nothing worse than a customer showing up on the showroom floor looking for a particular vehicle that has been out of stock for a week. Dynamic inventory feeds allow you to have dynamically updated inventory every 24 hours into your current streaming campaign commercial. And again, we'll show you what that looks like, but very important for the landscape that we're in today with inventory being as lean as it is. All right, number 2, reach and scale. We talked about this a little bit on the previous slides, but you want to be able to reach a partner that has the ability to scale amongst minute geographies, not using cable sign-ins or weird zones or geographies that you have to adhere to, but specifically getting down to actionable zip code levels. And for those of you that manage multiple rooftops, this is important because you know the strategy changes just on the other side of town if you're trying to reach a different consumer and a different demographic base on the other side of town. So getting down to the pinpoint accuracy of the actual zip code level is important targeting. And reliable audiences and quality content providers. We touched on that ever so slightly. Number 3, precision targeting. When it comes to precision targeting, working with platform partners that have the best data sources, whether that be Polk or some of the other partners that you see on this page when it comes to Cadent, Axiom, TransUnion, Experian. Most of these are partnerships that you've seen in the auto industry for very many years. Our exclusive partnership with IHS Polk allows us to use Polk data targeting upfront to target auto intenders, auto enthusiasts, brand, make, model, people coming off lease, use intenders only. The list goes on and on and on to target those quality audiences. Because we know when we have a quality message that's reaching the right person, it takes less frequency to engage that person in an action. And then that person, then that campaign is enabled to optimize towards reach versus trying to go into a heavy frequency play. Therefore, we reach more people with targeted and great targeting. Number 4, ad fraud. We talked about it a little bit about being tag certified and the importance of looking at companies and working with vendors that are tag certified in the space. Understanding the inventory sources and the supply paths of how your inventory comes to bear with your brand and your marketing. You must demand accountability when it comes to working with your agencies and your providers when it comes to OTT and CTV in this space. It's no more considered acceptable to have just devices listed, to just have one line on your reported listing for here's how many impressions you served and here's your view to completion rate. Ultimate transparency and ad fraud is super, super important. And when it comes to that transparency, number 5 is how do you measure your outcomes and then the expertise involved in those outcomes. At Premion, we have closed loop attribution. All we ask is you place a small tag or pixel on your website. It does not slow down site speed. This is something I would demand of your OTT and CTV partners. This enables you to not only view in a closed loop environment, so not correlation. Correlation is what we used to do several years ago, where we correlate our TV runtimes back to when we saw a spike in our Google Analytics. This is 100% closed loop attribution, takes GA out of the middle of the conversation. So an ad is streamed in the living room like we're seeing here. The consumer picks up their cell phone, their laptop, their tablet, etc. Same device that's connected to the same IP address as streaming television. They have a corresponding action back to the website. We then track each and every place that they go on the website. In that attribution modeling, we show several things as far as lift when it comes to website attribution, in addition to be able to set up very specific KPIs and key performance indicators, such as VDP and SRP conversions on the website. Location attribution is growing. Earlier in the presentation, I talked about the importance of the IDFA changes with Apple and the deprecation of location tracking. We are reinstituting our location tracking coming up here in the next month to be able to track and model people that actually were exposed to the ad and then tracking their device usage all the way onto the dealership lot via their mobile and their location tracking. What we've learned with the IDFA changes with Apple is that a lot of people opted out because they didn't want, quote, Big Brother following them everywhere they went. And what we're seeing now is that that is somewhat paused, and we're seeing kind of a different evolution come back on IDFA, that the people that truly want location tracking shared are the ones that are using apps and devices such as maps, location services, car sharing services, etc., that need those location services turned on in order to use those services. So we saw the great divide and the great opt-out in IDFA last year. And with that opt-in and that growing sentiment coming back the other way now, we see the location attribution part growing as well. The other aspect that I like is the linear reach extension. So this will enable you to look at both your linear TV campaign and your OTT streaming campaign in a Venn diagram to let you look at linear reach extension or OTT reach extension, and then what that small universe is of the overlap between the two. Typical campaigns see about 9% overlap. That gives you a high degree of comfortable ability to have an extension into the OTT and streaming space if you're only doing linear TV and vice versa. When we look at sales attribution, we do matchback reporting sales with Polk. And this is end-to-end true matchback reporting. It is used new auto sales only. Used is not allowed for tracking in some states. So we only track new auto sales. And with chip manufacturing starting to pick back up and inventories hopefully working back in the right areas, we're going to see this matchback actually having increased presence in a growth modeling moving forward. But we do have the ability to match back an auto sale back to a very specific household that saw the streaming ad. And then transparent and detailed reporting when it comes to that. As an example here, the Premion OTT ad is served, the viewership is sent to IHS Polk. Polk then matches back the viewer household data. And then what comes back to us is sales lift information, such as this report right here, accounting for new vehicles sold, campaign lift, targeted 83% of targeted dealer sales occurred within 60 days of the first impression. So that long tail strategy about tracking the consumer and how many days it took to convert, as well as simple demographic information broken down by age, gender, and income. So true end-to-end closed loop matchback reporting with Polk IHS Marketplace. And finally, when it comes to transparency, actionable insights when it comes to measuring outcomes in your CTV and OTT spend. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it's very important. Let's see the networks that we're running on and impressions that are broken down by very specific sets of creative previews within the dashboard. So you can actually click and see the creative that was associated with said data. Percentage of CTV breakout. We optimize towards connected TV, so that's going to be a high percentage of the buy. Impression, excuse me, impressions by heat map, like you see on the right. Anything that you hover over is a zip code, and that zip code will tell you exactly how many impressions each month, each week were broken down into that very specific zip code. That's dynamic. Our targeting is dynamic, and of course, that will always optimize and change each and every month. Impressions broken down by audiences that we're targeting. So when we look at the targeting and the demographics that we break that down into audiences as well. Number of hours the creative was watched. View to completion rates, 95+% or higher. It's a non-skippable environment, pre-roll, mid-roll only. And we do supply reach and frequency modeling to mirror what you see in the broadcast side of your marketing plans as well. And then we look at device breakouts. And then most importantly, full transparency when it comes to client logins or building APIs to build in automatic data feeds into your current organizational structure. For Premion, a little bit about us in the automotive space. Well over 1,100 clients in the last couple of years. Over 7,000 campaigns have been brought to market, which equals over 10.1 billion impressions served across the United States. And that's over 411% campaign growth since 2018. And this is just in the tier 2 and tier 3 space, used and new across the board. All dealerships, all rooftops, and our exclusive audience targeting with Polk IHS Marketplace. So a lot of great things on the Premion front. Those are the 5 rules of the road. Focus on quality content sources, reaching scale and scale of capabilities. Be aware that your content partners can do that. Reaching audiences with precise and great targeting partnerships. We talked about tag and tag certification and combating OTT and CTV ad fraud. And most importantly, we have to drive measurable outcomes with our reporting and transparency of our reporting. We have many stakeholders on the call that need to see what we're getting for the bucks that we're spending in the CTV and OTT space. And full transparency on the back end is most important. And that's why we're proud to give you our attribution modeling as added value in any Premion campaign that you do with us in the United States. And with that, I mentioned dynamic ad insertion earlier and direct inventory feeds. I would like to get out of the presentation mode now and just share a couple of examples of what that looks like. All right, the first one I'm going to share is a Mazda dealership. And this template that you're going to see here is actually creative that is in an L bar format. And when it's served, the L bar serves around the ad. And then the ad that's playing in the middle is somewhat of a generic or evergreen ad that can be used month over month. So we can use the dynamic ad insertion to update inventory feeds and not put a bunch of money into production costs and put that more into marketing and growing market share. With that, here's the commercial.
All-new Doug's Mazda in Edmonds sets the standard for dealerships across the country.
Purchase a new 2022 Mazda CX-5, CX-9, or CX-30 and enjoy 0.9% interest for 36 months. Plus, current Mazda leaseholders receive $500 when they lease a new CX-5, CX-9, or CX-30.
And Doug's service customers will receive a courtesy loaner while your vehicle is being repaired.
Doug's.
All right, I'll stop it there. Everyone kind of gets the gist. The OEM messaging for co-op purposes in the middle, and everything that you see to the right and the bottom are live direct feeds of the inventory on their lot. These can be set up for used. They can be set up for new. They can be set up by specific verticals. If you're having truck month, we can do truck month. If you're doing sedan month, we could do sedans. So everything is dynamic in the manner in which it changes. And I will share one more. Bear with me just a second here. All righty. Excuse me as I switch screens. And here we go.
We just really have to focus.
Yeah, and not get thrown off when they send us to someone else.
Right.
Welcome to Marysville Toyota.
Let me show you how we do things the easy way.
From our state-of-the-art facility to our one person, one price philosophy, you'll see that things are different here. In the end, you'll walk out feeling great. That's the easy way. And that's how we do it at Marysville Toyota. Visit.
All right. So those are just a few of the examples when it comes to dynamic ad insertion. And with that, I will go back and we can open it up for any questions along the way. Kat or Anthony, do we have any questions that have come during the chat?
A lot of great information there, Jason. Thank you so much. As you described, it's all evolved significantly since that time of appointment television, as you referenced from the 90s of Friends and those shows.
I was dating myself, Nick.
Well, I remember that as well, and I can even rewind back a little further when it was rabbit ears and just 3 networks, and you had to physically go to the television to change one of the channels. So it's definitely come a long way, as they say. Again, our special guest for today's webinar is Jason Jones, who is the Director for Regional Sales with Premion, and our webinar today is focused on how automotive marketers can win with streaming TV, since that's certainly a method of choice for how consumers partake of their entertainment nowadays. And if you have any questions, again, you can use the chat function here on the Zoom platform. And Jason, it was amongst your fascinating slides was the one that showed all of the various streaming services and options that consumers have nowadays. It was really a vivid example of just how much is out there. But just to reiterate, you mentioned how dealership inventory can be displayed. If you could touch on how that works on services like Hulu or some of the other, don't have to go through every single streaming service, but maybe Hulu and some of the other more popular ones that have some of the largest subscriber bases.
Sure, and I'll cover that a little bit generically, so I don't get in trouble with my friends over at said properties. So we talk about those as walled gardens, whether those be cable subscriptions or sign-in subscription services. Penetration rates in those ratios for those services, those login streaming services that you just mentioned, tend to be in the low 30 percentile ranges for each individual markets. Great brand awareness, great products, great household names. But scale has always traditionally been the hardest part for them. They only get a certain percentage of the inventory. We know how traditional cable breaks work, right? Cable only gets about 20% of the inventory, and then the other 80% are all the network commercials that are fed down from the network. That's the style of mentality of how we're accessing the inventories, coming through that network wash, and then through the over that waterfall into the other ecosystems. And then some of those pay environments, people pay to get around the ads. You mentioned Hulu, for example. That's just one statistic that Hulu is self-reporting that 30% of the people pay to get around the ads. So when you look at Hulu penetration being roughly 30% in any DMA, you have to minus 30% out of that to get into the ad-supported avenue. Working with a company like Premion, that's why we say we're platform and device agnostic, and that we cut our teeth at the highest network levels as they cascade over the waterfall and transpire and distribute out through the networks and the device distributors. We follow those inventory supply paths in an appropriate manner to target the right people.
Very good. Very good.
It's a great question.
In light of what you just shared, how recent and up to date is the Premion data? Since it sounds like it can be refreshed and up to date pretty frequently, to say the least.
Yeah, there's a couple avenues we look at. I'll take that as two sides of the coin. So from an attribution standpoint, we measure web attribution 7 days from last exposure. So it's called a 7-day look ahead period. So the recency is fairly recent. The Polk matchback reporting, so end to end, the furthest point that you can go from a web visit is a actual purchase. That purchase is measured out as far as 60 days. Location attribution will be measured 30 days. So you see there's a little bit of a stair-step approach when it comes to the measurement. All right, let's reverse engineer from, okay, that's the outcomes, the output on the back end. The input side. Every one of us have an IP address at our household. IP addresses on average are updated roughly every 14 days. So in accordance with those IP address changes, we want to make sure that our data targeting on our auto segments is updated every 14 days. So roughly every 14 to 20 days is a cycle depending on the actual vertical that we're pulling in from Polk and on our auto partners. So it's really important that we get into the same cadence as the refresh rates as the IP refresh rates in your household.
Very
Jason?
nice. Very
Jason?
nice.
Jason?
Hi, Catherine.
Hey, we have a question in the chat box. The question is, what's a typical monthly budget a local dealer will spend with Premion?
Yeah, that's a varying question based on DMA size. My recommendation is always take a look at the total inventory available to you. In our environment, we call it max avails. So it doesn't matter if you're working in market 100 or market 1. Look at what the total opportunity is in your trade area. It's hard to answer the dollar standpoint, and I really wish I could, because it's a question that's asked a lot. If you're looking at surgically interacting with very specific zip codes, you have a truck campaign for these zip codes. You have a coming off lease in the next 6 months for these zip codes. And the third zip code is new intenders only. It's important to look at in each of those very specific trade areas, pull out the maximum available impressions that you have at your disposal, and then decide between your partnership with Premion and the dealership, what percentage of that inventory you want to own. And in most cases, the conversation always starts at, well, I need to own at least 50% of the inventory. Well, if you're in market 1, 50% of the inventory can be $50,000 to $75,000 in a month if you're not careful. So to a varying degree, that's going to take a little bit of logic and a little bit of math locally, but take a look at the maximum available inventory that you have based upon the targeting parameters that the dealership gives you. And then from there, decide what percentage you want to own. I like reverse engineering it that way, because if at the end of the month you have co-op that's going unused, it's one simple phone call and you say, okay, I need to throttle up. We're only buying 25% share of voice. Let's go to 50% share of voice. I'm not going to lose this co-op. Let's throttle it up and deliver more impressions. So you always, to a varying degree, have the opportunity to understand where you stand at any given moment with your inventory supply path. Great question.
Again, our special guest for this webinar is Jason Jones, who is Director of Regional Sales at Premion, and we're discussing how connected TV and streaming services can be leveraged into your dealership's advertising campaigns. And Jason, referencing back to a comment you made during your great presentation about all the acronyms that are out there. If you could, how does VDP, we'll go with that acronym, VDP reporting, how does that play into the platform and all of the data that can be reviewed and tracked? How does that come into play, the VDP aspect? Yeah,
certainly our attribution platform at Premion allows us to set up certain KPI parameters. And in those KPIs, what we do is we look at the very specific URL taxonomy. So anything that has a taxonomy that gets down to the VDP level, we can actually set that up as a KPI. The reason I like to do that is it's usually the last area of influence before somebody jumps into a chat box, somebody does a form fill, or somebody prints directions, or has a phone call. So it's the last area of influence that we can hold the hand downstream in our attribution reporting. From there, we look at location. From there, we look at Polk matchback. But from a VDP or an SRP standpoint, Or if you're running a service campaign, thank you pages, directions pages, location identifier trackers. There's several KPIs that we can set up. We offer up 2 on the onset because that's typically about what most people look at. And then there we look at the taxonomy for the VDP pages and looking at those very specific vehicles. Again, the last area of influence that we can ascertain before someone hands off to the dealership. So that all does come out in the wash in our reporting and the added value that we give on the attribution side.
Jason, we have
Hi,
another
Catherine.
question. We have another
Yes.
question. Hey, puppy. How is the Polk data used by Premion?
Simply put, it's used in the pre-sale and post-sale process. So pre-sale, when it comes to vertically targeting the campaigns, like we mentioned, whether it be auto intenders, when it looks at people coming off lease, used intenders, service intenders, etc. So the data targeting up front based upon research from Polk, and then Polk in the rears as far as looking at Polk matchback reporting and matching back exact households that were exposed to an ad, and then matching to addresses sold.
My apologies there for my dog chiming in that the UPS truck has arrived out in front of our house here. But so again, our special guest for today's webinar is Jason Jones, Director of Regional Sales for Premion. And Jason, just to reiterate some of the elements that you've emphasized during our presentation, which again is being recorded, so you can review it at your leisure or when you have the opportunity. Again, how does the Premion network target its endeavors here to make sure, as you referenced earlier, if it's a truck campaign or off lease campaign or whatever the dealership might be trying to accomplish, how does that targeting work to try to get the most ROI and the most effectiveness?
Well, most certainly, it's a secret sauce question, which some folks don't want me to answer on this call, but it's looking at very specific data and trending data that is updated every 14 days within our platform in very specific marketplaces in partnership with Polk.
Very nice, very nice. Well, closing moments here with Jason Jones, Director of Regional Sales for Premion. And again, if you have questions, you can use the chat function or certainly review the great presentation that Jason has made. Again, how would you just to wrap us up, just how much as we reference, you shared how each of us remember the days of appointment television. Just how much has this space really evolved, and how ripe is it for dealerships to take advantage?
Well, I think the referencing back the BIA Kelsey forecast study, looking at an 80% rise in connected TV ad spend over the next 3 years. I think that says it all. I mean, the growing space in the category, the unease in the space of social media, the lack of effective strategy when it comes to PPC branded campaigns, for example, deprecating some of your PPC branded buys instead of getting into conquesting campaigns, et cetera, come a little bit further up the funnel with great targeting, dictate the search intent downstream. Don't leave the search intent in a PPC space to come up with, okay, I'm going to show up with 4 or 5 different people at the top of the search page and hope that they remembered me. Let's come a little bit up the search funnel, take some of those PPC branded dollars. It's a way to create a campaign in the CTV space when you don't have budget, and really dictate what the search intent is further downstream. We finally got our friends at Google to admit that it's not all about last click attribution anymore. Well, we have the power to dictate where that click goes and the top of mind awareness, or TOMA, when it comes to our marketplaces. It's very important that we start to dictate those searches downstream. It will give greater importance to our search strategy. And by the way, in our attribution modeling, we will actually show you domain referral reports. So if you're if you're doing any campaigns social media wise, or anything with a UTM string, anything from PPC, anything out of, like I said, social, any of those, or organic search, direct traffic, all of the ways in which people are exposed to your ad, and then they come to your doorstep, your virtual doorstep, we will let you know that supply path of every way they found a way to get to your doorstep. So if you are running PPC, this works in concert with that as somebody comes in through a PPC campaign. But over time, it does allow us to measure direct and organic traffic, which is the ultimate complement when we see lift long-term in those campaigns and reduction of people coming in via PPC campaigns. The better we brand upstream dictates where they go in command of their search downstream. Premion and the targeting in the CTV and OTT space allows us to take control of that ecosystem and demand where the consumer goes downstream, or most importantly, the best part, just coming direct.
Very good. Again, that's Jason Jones, Director of Regional Sales at Premion. Jason, thank you again for the great presentation and information. A fascinating topic to say the least. That's changing by the day. So thank you again.
My pleasure, Nick. Thank you, and thanks for everyone for tuning in today. Really appreciate everybody, and best of luck in getting some chips manufactured here soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you again with us next time.